On today's Monday Night Travel, tour guide Niki Vlachou takes us on an odyssey to Greece's rugged and mysterious Peloponnese Peninsula. Working our way counterclockwise, we'll begin by learning about Greece's ancient capital of Mycenae. Next, we'll get a lesson on the Olympic Games in Olympia, discover great food and time capsule churches on the Mani Peninsula, and enjoy soaring views on the great rock of Monemvasia. We'll finish with a stroll through the charming port town of Nafplio. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Monday Night Travel with Rick Steves Europe. My name is Gabe Gunning, and I am so excited to be back with all of you for Season 4 and to explore a rugged and mysterious corner of Greece, the Peloponnese Peninsula, with a very special guest. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome back to the show Greece guide extraordinaire, Niki Vlachou. Niki, welcome back to Monday Night Travel.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello to everyone.
So, Niki, the last time that we had you present with us was back in March, right before tour buses were getting rolling. And now we're in October and the major tour season is wrapping up for the year. And I'm just wondering, how did your 2023 tour season go?
Oh, it was more than wonderful. Busy, lots of interesting people, lots of tours all around the Peloponnese and the rest of Greece. It was more than what we have expected.
And do you primarily just lead the Athens and the Best of Greece tour?
I do that twice a year, basically, the Best of Greece tour, since I like being either in my base, Athens, for the early and the late season, and the rest of the time I'm in ancient Olympia, which is one of my favorite sites in the country. And that's
is that where you are now?
That's where I am right now, yes.
Wow. Oh, well, as we'll get to later, I am a huge Olympics nerd. And so I am so excited to go to ancient Olympia later in tonight's show with you. But first, we want to share with any viewers who might be interested in an upcoming trip to Greece and especially the Peloponnese Peninsula. We're going to share some kind of travel nuts and bolts. Oftentimes we have people asking similar questions about what's the best time of year to go? How should I get around? So, Niki, I would love if you could take just a couple minutes to walk our viewers through these travel nuts and bolts about the Peloponnese Peninsula.
With pleasure. The highest season for visitors around the Peloponnese, and especially the east and the west coast of it, are spring or autumn, that the weather is more ideal for sightseeing and for visiting the many historic sites we have. But I would say that the Peloponnese, like many other parts of Greece, are a year-round destination, because what most people don't know about Greece is that apart from the beautiful beaches and the sunshine we have in the summer, there are so many beautiful mountain villages. There are so many ski centers and activities you can enjoy if you are a winter traveler, if you want to be away from the big crowds. So any time of year, depending on what someone is looking for to experience, would be a good time to visit the Peloponnese. For example, if you come in November, which is officially the beginning of the off-season, you will enjoy beautiful weather. It won't be ideal for going to the beach, but it's still sunny and with very pleasant temperatures. You can enjoy visiting the olive presses, because it's the time of year we produce the fresh olive oil. And you can still drive around easily without having to face unexpectedly bad weather. Or if, like I said, if you want to go skiing or enjoy some mountain resorts, you can do it throughout the winter. While the summer, July and August, it's pretty hot, but a lot of people combine a little bit of history with mostly relaxation by the beach. The Peloponnese is the place that you can spend several days if you would like to. I would say 5 to 6 minimum to see the highlights. But if someone has a shorter period to spend on the Peloponnese and would like to go to the islands as well, I would say 3 to 4 days to cover the major sites. The public transportation is not ideal for getting from one place to the other, but of course you can get a bus from Athens to Olympia or from Athens to Nafplio. The problem derives when you want to go from these places to various other less popular destinations, and you have to make a lot of changes of connections with buses. So ideally, I would think that renting a car or arranging private transportation would be the best way to get around. Credit cards are accepted almost everywhere, so there wouldn't be a problem not to have cash with you to get around. And the only thing that would be wise to plan ahead would be, of course, accommodation and guided tours if someone would like to. The tickets for the sites and the museums, you don't really need to buy in advance unless if you would like to. Many of them have online booking systems. But it's only Athens where someone would need to get to buy a ticket at a certain time zone and buy it in advance. For most of the Peloponnese, it doesn't get so crowded, so busy. So even a last-minute booking would be okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Niki. I loved your answer for when to visit, and really it depends on what do you want to do. There are great things to do year-round. I certainly would love to go in the spring to see the wildflowers, or in the fall to see the olives getting pressed. So the seasonality of the Peloponnese sounds wonderful. And now, without further ado, I think that it is time for us to dive into the Peloponnese Peninsula. So let's drive on over now.
Greece, with a relatively sparse population and a fine road system, is easy to cover by bus or car. We've rented a car in Athens, and in 90 minutes, we're crossing the Corinth Canal. The Corinth Canal cuts the Peloponnesian Peninsula off from the rest of Greece. 2,000 years ago, the Roman Emperor Nero broke ground for this canal, but the 4-mile-long ditch wasn't actually dug until about a century ago by modern Greeks. Our first stop is ancient Mycenae, the oldest site you're likely to see in this land dotted by so many ruins. The Mycenaeans, who dominated the Greek world between 1600 and 1200 BC, were the first Bronze Age society to emerge on the European mainland. As the torch of civilization moved westward, they picked it up from the Minoans, an even earlier civilization that thrived on the Greek island of Crete. While the Minoans enjoyed the luxury of peace on their remote island, the Mycenaeans were a militaristic society surrounded by enemies. Their capital was heavily fortified and stood on an easy-to-defend hill, flanked by steep ravines with views all the way to the sea. Mycenae flourished because it was ideally situated for trade by both sea and land. In its day, the mighty Lion Gate would have been awe-inspiring. Standing strong here for over 3,000 years, it was the symbol of Mycenaean power. These were the early Greeks Homer wrote of in the Iliad and the Odyssey. Keep in mind, these people lived 1,000 years before the rise of Athens. They were as ancient and mysterious to Socrates and Plato as those Golden Age Greeks are to us.
Niki, I'm fascinated by how many really noteworthy and accomplished civilizations have risen and fallen in just the small amount of area that is Greece. I mean, it has been the cradle to so much of civilization. And I'm just curious, is this something that most modern Greeks are very well educated about? Does the average person on the street, do they know this history of all these civilizations? Is it something that they take pride in, and do they kind of see themselves as a continuation of that great Greek history?
Yes, I think that the majority of the Greek people not only take pride, are trying to find every opportunity to show off their connection to all those great different periods of ancient Greek history. The majority of the Greek population is gathered in Athens, but almost everybody has a hometown, has a village where his family came from, and they will always try to connect when they explain where they originally from, the history of that place, because all of Greece is full of history with where they originate from. It's something that we are being taught from a very young age, starting from the time that our families will start teaching us the Greek mythology. But then even in kindergarten, primary school, they give very, very big emphasis to teaching all this history to all young children. And most of the field trips, most of the excursions we will take with our schools will be on major sites. And Mycenae, I remember since I was a little girl, was one of the most popular sites to visit with our teachers. And no matter how much interested many of us would be in listening to all the details that the teachers would give us, the tour they would provide us with, deep inside us, we all already felt proud of belonging to this great civilization. So yes, the majority of the Greek people take very high pride and for being part of this civilization. And every opportunity we get, friends, family, we will visit all these sites again.
Well, I mean, the Greeks have a lot to be proud about. And Niki, I can just picture you as an elementary school student in these sites, just wide-eyed, seeing them for the first time. And now you get to visit them many, many times a year and see other people wide-eyed and amazed by them. So I'm glad that the Greeks are well educated about their history. Let's continue on and learn a bit more about that history.
While the ruins are stark and scant, with a little imagination, you can envision life here. For example, to fetch water, residents would descend into this cleverly constructed mine-like shaft and climb way, way, way down. I'm 60 feet below the surface. This is the cistern where the water was collected, piped in from a spring that was 500 yards outside the walls. Even back then, couldn't have a good fortress without water. Mycenae was at the peak of its power around 1300 BC, after which it and its empire seemed to disappear virtually overnight.
Niki, are there any theories of what happened to the Mycenaeans and why they disappeared so quickly?
There are several different theories, and the one that was the most popular until some years ago, and the one that we were mostly being taught even when I was in the school for tour guides, was that there was a time after the end of the Trojan War and after all that expedition that had tired the Mycenaeans and the fact that they were away from home for so long fighting, that having been weakened, there was an invasion from the north by the Dorians, who gradually took over the citadel and many other citadels that were in the area, burned them down, and that was how everything ended. But that theory seems to be left a little bit aside, and there are many, many scientists who, with different things that they discover, like, for example, a lot of broken pottery and a lot of other damages on the paintings left in the ruins of some of those citadels, thinking that maybe some volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, or climate change must have been the reason why they declined so quickly, and gradually their population became smaller and most of those citadels were abandoned. Drought, lack of production of all those products that they were famous in trading and gave them all the great incomes they had. It's more likely that that was the reason why they came to a fall.
I love learning about these ancient civilizations and how we can never be quite sure what happened. We're always guessing a little bit. So thank you for sharing those theories, and let's learn a bit more about the Mycenaeans.
A circular wall of stones defined the cemetery. Mycenae lay unappreciated until the 19th century, when a treasure trove of gold was unearthed in this necropolis. Today, those treasures are the star attractions back in Athens at the National Archaeological Museum. This discovery affirmed the archaeologists' theory that Mycenae was Homer's fabled city rich in gold, and the elaborate detail makes the sophistication of the Mycenaeans clear. These golden cups are exquisite. The so-called Mask of Agamemnon was a death mask placed on the face of a dead king in his coffin. The Mycenaeans took good care of their dead At least their important dead. This passageway leads to an underground royal tomb. The corbelled stonework was an engineering feat. Designed like a stone igloo, this Tholos tomb was the biggest dome of its day. This remarkable structure remained the king of domes until the Romans built their Pantheon about 1,400 years later. One way to judge a society's architectural finesse is by the distance it can span with no internal supports. By today's standards, this structure's not much, but back then, it was a wonder.
Niki, Rick is actually just this month in October, public television stations around the US are starting to share season 12 of Rick Steves Europe, which offers a sweep of European art and architecture from prehistory to today. And it's so interesting to me, to see how societies even centuries ago really valued things like those golden masks and kind of architectural marvels like this. And I'm just curious, why do you think that, what can we learn about civilizations through their art, and why has art been important to civilizations from the dawn of time?
I think that there is no better way to understand the way that people would have thought, would have lived, would have expressed themselves in any different period of history than through art. People always wanted to have a better understanding of their environment and wanted to express their thoughts and their feelings about different things happening around them. How about the Greeks, who have always been people with a lot of questions, who have always been people who wanted to explain everything their own ways, but at the same time were great wanderers, were great travelers. From a very early period of the Greek history, they would travel all around the Mediterranean, and they would see all those amazing other civilizations like the Egyptians, the Assyrians, would come back with so much influence from them and with so many exotic scenes from the other places they have seen, such as, for example, lions they kept on seeing in Africa and that they used so much in art. On the other hand, the Greeks were always having very high honor to their soldiers, to their warriors, and then to those that were dying in battle, or in general, people that had died and needed to be commemorated different ways. So through art, I think that we can have a much better understanding always of the way of thinking and acting of people. And it has always been their greatest way to express themselves.
I love that art is kind of a sociological exercise in, understanding the values and thoughts of people from the past. Thank you for sharing that perspective, Niki. And Niki, I'm wondering, you're over there in Olympia, are you ready for about 2,000 travelers to come on over right now?
Absolutely ready.
All right, well, here we go to Olympia.
The rugged, sparsely populated terrain of the Peloponnese evokes ancient times when Greeks considered this a mysterious and frightening land, a mythic world of terrifying creatures. No wonder it was here that Hercules was sent to perform most of his daunting labors. Ancient athletes were tested here as well. The sanctuary of Olympia was the birthplace of the Olympic Games. Despite the tourist crowds, it remains an evocative place, nestled among shady trees. Wandering its extensive ruins, it's clear Olympia was much more than a stadium.
Yes, seriously.
Local tour guide Niki Vlachou helps explain. So it's called the Sanctuary of Olympia.
Yes, but it was primarily a religious place dedicated to Zeus and the rest of the gods, with temples all over. And it was only open to people during the games for over 1,000 years.
The Temple of Zeus was magnificent in the 5th century BC and reminds us that the games were held in honor of the supreme deity of the Greek pantheon, or world of gods.
Inside this temple was that amazing statue of Zeus, which was considered to be one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Gold and ivory towering in the temple that made the Greeks lose their minds by seeing Zeus alive in front of them. This was one of their chances to meet the god in person, as they thought.
Niki, I'm a little bit fascinated by the 7 wonders of the world. I've gone down a lot of internet rabbit holes about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, but I hadn't learned much about the statue of Zeus before. Was this something that became kind of a pilgrimage site for a lot of Greeks in the ancient world? Would people travel just to come see this statue?
Yes, indeed. Of course, Olympia was important and was a top destination and a dream place to visit for most of the Greeks already before the statue was built, because Olympia started existing as a sanctuary already in 800 BC. The statue of Zeus was not built by Phidias, who came from Athens here to construct it before the middle of the 5th century BC. So already Olympia was a pilgrimage site for the majority of the Greeks that were even spread out in colonies all around the known world to want to come and visit. But as soon as that ancient wonder of the world, that magnificent statue was built and was placed inside the temple, it added a lot to the fame, the glory of the site, and the extra reasons why people would want to come here. The thing is that for most of the people coming here back in the day, it wasn't a statue. They wouldn't come here to just see a statue. They believed that they were coming to see the real Zeus, the real god, who was invisible like the rest of the gods according to their beliefs. But once the doors of that temple would open and there was a big cistern with olive oil in front of the statue, making the light shimmer and shine on the diamonds and the gold that it was made of, the illusions they were receiving, the feelings they would get would absolutely make them think that they were meeting the god in person. And we shouldn't forget to mention, I will act like a typical Greek now, that 5 of the 7 wonders were Greek, and one of them was here in Olympia.
And so, Niki, the statue of Zeus obviously was gone by the time you went to Olympia. I'm curious, what drew you to Olympia, and why do you choose to spend such a large portion of your year there?
I used to live and work in Athens full time when I started my career, but I had started to get tired of living out of a suitcase, of not being able to spend most of my time being at a site, but driving around places. And I experimented. That was the original thought, that I would come to Olympia just for a season or 2, so that I wouldn't have to be in the busy city of Athens that long. And this site captured me. The vibes, the atmosphere, everything about this this site is something that makes at least myself feel like I belong here. So although I live in Athens again year-round, I spend several months of the year working here because I feel very much connected to the place, to the history, and who knows, maybe in my previous life I was one of these priestesses, those very few women that could come here because women were not allowed in Olympia in antiquity. Maybe I had some connection to this place, I don't know.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And now I'm excited to learn a bit more about one of the other draws of Olympia, the Olympic Games. Let's continue on.
6 centuries after Christ, earthquakes sent its columns tumbling. Today, they lie here as if to illustrate how Greek columns were stacks of fluted limestone drums held together with square pegs. The popularity of the Games grew rapidly, attracting athletes from throughout the Greek world to compete in an ever-increasing number of events. There was javelin, discus, boxing. There's a sprint of 1 stadium length, the 2-stadium sprint, even 2-stadium sprint naked with all your armor. The last of the ancient games were held in 393 AD, not to be started again for 1,500 years. So why the Games?
To unify the Greeks, to strengthen the Greek culture, and to also teach all these young boys the military skills they needed. Plus, they had all these classrooms here to teach them the Greek philosophy.
So the Olympic Games actually made the Greek culture stronger.
The idea was that if the Greeks are to fight, they better fight in the stadium and be united against the rest of the world.
It's brilliant, and this worked for 1,200 years.
Yes?
The most vivid remnant of the Games is this, the original Olympic Stadium. Visitors just can't resist the chance to line up on the marble starting blocks and imagine athletes from around the Greek world doing the same thing at those first Games back in 776 BC.
Niki, I'm curious, were you around in Athens in 2004 when Athens hosted the Summer Games?
You won't believe this, but I was an Olympian during the Olympic Games in Athens.
You were? What was that experience like?
Loved it because, like every Greek, I was extremely proud for what was going on in our country and for the way that the Games were being promoted and organized. And Athens was packed with people that have come from all over the world to be there during that big celebration of sports and ideas. But on the other hand, I was very happy that I didn't have to mess with all these huge crowds that were everywhere. And I had to be in Olympia, which was less crowded than normally because most people wouldn't take that long drive and spend time out of Athens since they were here for that specific reason. But on the other hand, I love the idea that it was all over the news and all over the discussions that Olympia is where all this amazing idea and celebration started from originally. In Olympia was where they lit the torch like they always do for the opening ceremony of the Games. And apart from that, in 2004, they did something that has never happened before. They hosted in this ancient stadium that you just showed in the video, one of the Olympic events. And they hosted the shot put event in the ancient stadium, having not added anything to it, just like you see it in the video, just like the way it was in the ancient times, with 20,000 people taking advantage of the ramps of earth around it as their seats. And I got to get a ticket and be one of them. So I did watch one of the Olympic events, but in the very original Olympic stadium, and it was fascinating.
Oh, that must have been amazing. I'm hoping that the Games will go back to Greece at some point because I would love to experience that.
We hope so too.
Well, now that we've got some running in here, it is time to get those calories back, and we are going to venture to a rugged part of the Peloponnese Peninsula that has some excellent food.
The town of Kardamili, gateway to the Mani Peninsula, is one of the oldest names in the annals of Greek history, even mentioned in Homer's Iliad. This unassuming little seaside getaway is a fine spot to relax and settle into the pace of Greek country life. The remains of the tiny fortified Old Town are a reminder that Kardamili was deserted in the Middle Ages when pirates forced the inhabitants to retreat up into the hills. Most remained there until the 18th century, when tower houses like these allowed a safe return. Yanis Demetrius runs a delightful little shop that showcases the organic riches of this corner of Greece. You know, this room to me is just a celebration of everything you can find in the hills here in the Peloponnese.
Well, that's how we feel about it, actually, and that's why we're running this little store.
So you find everything here essentially up in the hills, just in, in your backyard.
Next door. Well, should I show you what I pick now, Rick?
Sure.
Well, this is it. This is chamomile or chamomile. This is a beautiful chamomile, as you can see, white and yellow flower. Mm-hmm. It is the flower that we are after.
So all the good stuff is in the flower.
The good stuff, the good stuff inside the flower that make you rest, sleep easily at night, calm down your stomach. If you got a cold, soothes down your sore throat and everything. The doctors recommend it.
So this is like a pharmacy.
You've got it. Let me show you the olives now.
Okay.
We have many different types of olives. But what it is about olives is the way we make them. You don't go off the tree, of course, and pick them like you pick any other fruit and you eat it. They have to be picked and then go through a process of being marinated, cleaned up, washed, and after a certain time, they'll be ready to eat.
What do we have here?
These are the Kalamata olives. Kalamata. As the town Kalamata, that's the name of the olives. Now, this is made very simply. This is made with sea salt, wine vinegar, and olive oil. As simple as that.
Now, what's in this one?
Well, this is Kalamata and green ones mixed together and marinated with more herbs. Sea salt, wine vinegar, 6 herbs, olive oil, and garlic.
I have to try one.
Of course. It's my pleasure.
This is the herby version. These are the same kind of olives as these and these, but with more herbs.
With more herbs.
It's good. And all of those herbs were found in the hills?
On the hillsides.
By you?
By me.
Really?
Absolutely.
So you must feel very personal about these olives.
I mean, I'm almost in love with it. I love doing it.
The charm of Cardamili is its low-key atmosphere, especially lunch or dinner time overlooking the coast. We're here before the tourist season hits, and it's mostly locals enjoying the scene. It's Sunday, and 2 goats are roasting on the spit as we settle in for a taste of the local cuisine. Starting with ouzo, the Greek anise-based aperitif. Then a fresh Greek salad, stuffed peppers, and tzatziki, the yogurt dip that accompanies most meals. And when goat's on the spit, why choose anything else?
So, Niki, I know that I loved hearing Giannis talk about how he's almost in love with the olives that he picks and lovingly marinates. And I know that in places like France and Italy, they're famous for taking pride in using local ingredients, shopping at the farmers markets, and then even during their meals, taking the time to really eat slowly and savor. That's something that we Americans stereotypically are not regarded as being quite as good at with our fast food restaurants and always eating on the go. Would you say that Greeks in general kind of share that more French and Italian sentiment of using local ingredients and luxuriating over a meal?
Absolutely. And this might not be something that people living in big cities will be able to enjoy every single day. Of course, there will be people who will have something to eat on the go when they are busy working. But in the end of the day or during the weekend, or for the people that have the luxury to live on the countryside and be occupied with something that doesn't make them work that long hours every day, it's absolutely something we will appreciate doing. For us, going out with friends, with family, on a daily basis for dinner, or on the weekends, for example, Sunday's lunch, which is more like a sacred moment to share with friends or family. It's not just being served a dish, eating it and going home. It's more like a symposium. It will have to be accompanied by good wine, and it will definitely have to have fresh and well-cooked ingredients, traditional dishes that we all enjoy eating over long discussions. I mean, eating for the Greeks is not just sit down and eat. It's more like a feast. It's more like a process of socializing and exchanging ideas and having fun all together.
What are some things that Greeks like to talk about over a long dinner?
It would be nice to say science or history, but basically we love gossiping each other. We love gossiping our friends, our neighbors, and we love talking about how things have changed in the world, always remembering how great things used to be in the past. You know, we love talking about the past and how much better things were in the past, complaining a little bit. We love nagging. It's one of the elements that characterize the personalities of most of the Greeks. But then in the end, after nagging and talking about all that, we'll say, hey, oh, let it go. Let's say yamas, let's have a sip of wine and everything will be fine tomorrow. And let's continue being optimistic.
Well, It sounds like very fun dinner conversation to me. And we actually have a clip of you and Rick in Greece together sampling another flavor of Greek cuisine that I'm sure would help loosen up lips and help that gossip a little bit. So let's take a peek at that video of you and Rick.
Hi, I'm Rick Steves. We are in the most wild spot here in the south of Peloponnese Peninsula. I thought this was ouzo, but it's not. It's super ouzo, and Niki's going to explain it to us. What is the story about this ouzo?
This is tsipuro. It's even worse than
Wow.
ouzo.
And why? What is special about this one? How was it
It's
made?
really strong. This specific
great.
one was made by a monk on Mount Athos, way up in northern Greece, and it has nothing artificial in it. It's all pure, strong.
Sip it. Let me see you sip it.
Hand-picked
Sip it or kill it or execute it or yamas.
Execute it. Wow.
steamy yamas.
Yama. So this is more than ouzo. What is the name again?
Tsipuro.
Sipuro. And we go. Do we go? How do we say cheers?
Yamas.
Steamy yamas.
Yamas from Greece.
So, Niki, I know it's early in the morning there, so we're not going to make you drink tsipuro, but I know you have a little bit with you.
Right here.
So cheers. I just have my water. I'm behaving.
Yamas, I'll just
while I'm
smell
doing
it.
all this. But did you say that it's made by monks?
It is also made by monks today, but not only by monks. Originally, it was produced on Mount Athos, which is in northern Greece. It's a peninsula where we have a territory that is all inhabited by monks in monasteries that are isolated, and you need a special permission anyway to visit. And back on the 14th century, they started producing it because, you know, in Greece, we don't have, in the Greek Orthodox Church, we don't have dry communion, we have wet communion. So we make the communion from wine. So you need the grapes, and most of the monasteries used to have their own vineyards from which they produced the wine. And since Greece has been a country going through a lot of financial issues and periods of serious poverty, people would need to take advantage of everything and produce things to drink or eat, even from underproducts, such as the pumice, from what's left after the must of the grapes gives us, with the fermentation, the wine. So that was how the tradition started. But tsipuro, which basically means pumice in Greek, means what's left of that pulp from the mast of the grapes, is something that is being produced all around Greece. In the past, it used to be produced a lot by individual people in their homes, but because some people were not following the exact right rules, and there were some problems with a higher level of alcohol that there should be in the tsipuro, the Greek government prohibited that, and now wineries and different other distilleries produce tsipuro all around the country. You need to have a special permission to do that. You have to pay some extra taxes to produce tsipuro. And it's something that is very popular. I mean, people love drinking tsipuro in many different occasions. And in many cases, even when you go to the doctor with a sour throat, some of the more traditional doctors, some of the more old-fashioned doctors, before they prescribe medicine or antibiotics to you, will tell you, sip a little bit of tsipuro, or maybe mix a little bit of tsipuro with honey and put it on your throat, and it might kill all the germs, because it's pure alcohol. It comes from the evaporation of boiling all that pulp, and kills all germs.
Well, we are entering cold and flu season here, so you just got a prescription from Dr. Niki. Pick up some tsipuro for if you have a little scratchy throat in the morning. And Niki, you just recently taught me something, which is that traditional Greek salads do not have lettuce or leafy greens in them, which every Greek salad I've had in my life has.
Yes, the Greek salad, in Greece at least, does not contain any lettuce. I think this is more of a Greek American version of it. The traditional way of making Greek salad is, since it's a seasonal salad, it's a summer salad, it has to have the ingredients you are able to get more easily in the summer. And lettuce is not something that, unless if you get it from a greenhouse, you will have year round. So we use mainly tomatoes, fresh and juicy tomatoes.
So I have tomatoes,
Cucumbers.
cucumbers.
Oh, there you go. Green peppers.
Green peppers, of course.
Okay.
All right.
You have some onions there?
What?
You have some onions there?
I do have some onions right here.
Olives.
Of course. Kalamata.
Perfect. Some people also like to add capers. I love adding capers to my salad, but you won't find them everywhere, in all versions, I mean, of the Greek salad. And of course, feta cheese. That's the cherry on the cake. That's the greatest part, I think, the greatest ingredient of the Greek salad, the good quality of feta cheese.
And I read that you're not supposed to crumble it. You're supposed to kind of put it in pieces.
A big square piece you put on top, and then you crumble it before you serve it to everyone that will share that meal with you.
All right. And then what dressing do we put on top?
Oregano. Do you have oregano?
I mixed it into my dressing.
Okay. Okay. And olive oil, of course, extra virgin olive oil.
Yeah, some olive oil and some red wine vinegar.
And some nice pressed bread.
Oh, I don't have any bread, but I do have my Greek salad compiled now. So how would we say, what's the Greek equivalent of bon appetit?
Kali, which means good.
Kali.
Orexi. Orexi is appetite. That's where the word anorexia comes from, which means something totally different, of course.
Kali.
Orexi.
Kali orexi.
Joy.
All right. Well, while I dig into this, Niki, we are going to head back to the Mani Peninsula and do some exploring there. Here we go.
Kardamili is a good springboard for exploring the Mani Peninsula. This southeastern tip of the European mainland feels as wild as its history. In the 17th and 18th centuries, this godforsaken corner of Greece was known to travelers as the land of evil counsel. That's because of its reputation for robbery and piracy, a more reliable way to survive here than trying to eke out an honest living by farming this barren land. The town of Vathia is one of the region's characteristic tower settlements. The best preserved of all the Mani villages, its deserted fortified houses are a poignant reminder that these harsh conditions forced the population to seek protection in clans. In its day, the population was swollen by an influx of refugees fleeing whatever crisis was gripping Greece further to the north. Looking around at the stark landscape of the Mani Peninsula, which barely supports 5,000 people today, it's hard to believe that 200 years ago it sustained a population of almost 60,000.
Niki, it's incredible to me that it has so much fewer people now than it did, 200 years ago. Why do so few people live there today? And what types of people live there now? Are there any industries that thrive there?
First of all, I would like to mention that the Mani Peninsula was always a very, very difficult area to live in, to make a living at, because it's more than rocky, it's more than mountainous and very dry. And it was always very difficult for people to be able to produce mats and make a decent living there. I mean, if you go and see the olives on the trees on the Mani Peninsula, the flesh of the olives is much smaller. It's a smaller amount than the pit of the olive itself. They are delicious, but they are olives that don't grow big and don't, of course, give as much of a production of olive oil as olives give from in other areas. But during the Ottoman occupation, because the Ottomans were not so much interested in such a difficult to cross and dominate area, and because the Maniats, the people living there, were always very wild, very rough, very tough, was one of the areas that was not really being controlled by the Ottomans. And a lot of people moved there because they were able to live there without having to go through all the situation everyone else dealt with in the rest of the country being under the Ottoman occupation. After Greece became a free country again, of course, many of the people from there moved elsewhere where life would be easier. And the Mani started becoming less and less inhabited. But things are rapidly changing the last few years because the Mani is becoming more and more popular for tourists that visit, that drive around it. The roads are improving as well because it was very difficult to drive through it. And we keen to have more and more Northern Europeans who come and retire in the Mani. The Mani is gradually becoming some sort of a Florida of Greece. We have so many Scandinavians, British, Germans who are coming and buying land and are building homes where they spend 3-4 months a year, and the rest of the time they're back home, or some of them live year-round there. So the population, I think, is slowly growing in the Mani. And with so many tourist businesses also opening up gradually in different places, it's getting back to a different kind of glory and peak, I think.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, a hard place maybe to do farming and make a living, but I guess if you're retired, a great place to do some relaxing.
Yes.
Let's continue exploring the Mani Peninsula.
Just up the coast, wedged in a ravine, the village of Castania is more inviting and offers a rare opportunity to explore a traditional Mani village. While it feels pretty sleepy today, Castania was once a local powerhouse. During the 19th century Greek War of Independence, it boasted no less than 400 guns, as Mani people called their menfolk. They were gathered under a warlord whose imposing family tower still stands over the town square. Along with many guns, the town had many churches. The tiny Church of St. Peter, thought to have been built during the 12th century, is a fine example of Byzantine church architecture of the time.
Hi, I'm Rick Steves. I'm in a tiny, tiny village, a sleepy village called Castania in the south of Greece. And the metabolism here is almost, the economic metabolism is almost nothing. But you wander through and you find these churches. Here's the Church of St. Nicholas. And I go through here and, okay, there's a little gate on the churchyard. And then cemetery on the hill. Wow. You can imagine pulling that rope as they have for a long, long time. Call the people. And here we have it. And it's my own private, amazingly peaceful, tiny, sleepy village, church, ancient chandeliers, dangling light bulbs, jerry-rigged, stories telling all sorts of lessons of the Bible with an orthodox filter, everything with symbolism, and the iconostasis from where all of the important work is done by the priest. And we're exploring a little village in the remote part of the Peloponnese Peninsula. Happy travels.
So, Niki, what is the population of Greece today still very religious overall?
Not so easy to give a direct answer to that because it depends on which area we are talking about and the age of the people we are referring to. I think that the younger people and the people in the bigger cities are becoming less and less religious. But in places like the Peloponnese, in smaller villages, in more remote towns, people continue being very religious. And even the younger people or the people from the bigger cities that are more fascinated with the more modern way of living, they might not be visiting the churches as frequently as people do on the countryside, but they still follow some of the traditions. They still will want to visit the church every single Easter or when we have the big celebration on August 15th of the Dormition of Mary. So I would say that since 95% of the population in Greece are Greek Orthodox, some being more religious, some being less religious, some visiting less times a year the church than others, we still have that connection. We still feel that strong connection with the church because it's part of our tradition and history.
And are a lot of these small countryside churches still maintained well?
For example, a couple of those churches that we saw on the clip were very recently restored on a very, very good way. The Greek government and the Ministry of Culture are doing their best to restore, to maintain, to preserve the best way possible the majority of them. But once you come to Greece and you drive around, especially some of the areas that were important during the Byzantine years, like the Mani, you will see that there are so many of them, and many of them are such tiny little churches that it will take time to be able to maintain all of them. There are many of them who are a little bit left to their own luck, but they're doing more and more work trying to preserve as many as possible of them.
All right, well, let's continue on now from some small churches to a very large rock.
The short drive eastward through the mountains takes us to the magnificent island fortress of Monemvasia. Often referred to as the Gibraltar of Greece, this is a virtual showcase of Byzantine, Ottoman, and Venetian history dating back to the 13th century. Its historic causeway is still the only way on or off this burly chunk of land. The town's fortified gate opens onto Monemvasia's narrow cobbled main street, which meanders uphill past an assortment of tourist shops and cafes with terraces overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. In the 14th century, the fortress of Monemvasia was also a prosperous trading center. In its day, it was one of the great commercial centers of the Byzantine world, with a population of about 40,000. A key strategic holding, it was occupied back and forth between the Venetians and the Turks until modern times. Monemvasia then slipped into a decline that lasted until tourists rediscovered the place in the 1970s. Many of the town's houses have been restored and are used as weekend retreats by wealthy Athenians.
Niki, first, just a clarifying question. Does Monemvasia, does that refer both to kind of the big rock, the natural feature, and also the town? Are both of them called Monemvasia?
Yes, because basically there is nothing else there. There is the rock and that complex of houses that are on the one side of the rock, the one that is not visible from the access by road you have to that part of the Peloponnese. And yes, when we are referring to either the town or to the rock, we are referring to it as Monemvasia, which in Greek means only one access, only one way to get there. And it's the small bridge that connects the Peloponnese to the rock. Basically, Monemvasia is a rock into the water.
Rock into the water, Monemvasia. And are there any permanent residents of Monemvasia, or are most of the people there, are the businesses just serving tourists?
when I first went there some decades ago, I remember I met an older lady back in the day that had a big house, and she was living in one part of it, and she was renting the rest of it to different young couples like we were with my husband when we first went there. I'm talking about the late 90s. Before Airbnbs existed, and she was telling me how difficult it was to be able to live in this place where there are so many rocky and rugged and steep paths to get up and down, and then having to get the groceries in, having to do whatever else you need to do in there is much more difficult than living in a modern city. Of course, there are no cars. There is no access by scooters or cars to the higher points of it. And recently that I visited again and I wanted to go see how she's doing, I found out that she sold the property and it all became a small hotel. So more and more what's happening is that the people that used to live in there are moving out of it. They're moving across to modern Monemvasia, which is a charming little town on the Peloponnese and across from the rock, and are using their properties there for having a business, for making a living out of having a little cafe, a restaurant, or mostly renting them as rooms to the so many people that visit.
Well, it seems like a great business proposition. I would definitely splurge for that view.
It's more than amazing. It's something that the videos, the photos cannot really capture. The way that you will see it, experience it, and feel once you visit that amazing place. The ship made of stone, as a Greek poet had characterized it.
I love that. All right, well, let's get a better look at this ship made of stone.
A steep zigzag path leads up and up out of the lower town. Passing through the old town gate, you enter the fortified upper town. Its ruins sprawl across the broad summit of the rock. In its day, Monemvasia was considered the mightiest fortress in Byzantine Greece. Not surprisingly, it was never taken in battle, but it was susceptible to siege. Its greatest weakness was its reliance on the mainland for food and water. The fortress's only surviving building is the 13th century Byzantine Church of St. Sophia. Hanging precariously to the edge of a sheer cliff, it strikes me as a metaphor for the resilience of traditional culture in our modern world.
Niki, can travelers enter this building and see the interior?
Yes, now they can. It was closed for many years. It reopened last year after a serious work of restoration and renovation the archaeologists have done. You know, this church is supposed to be the micrography of Saint Sophia in Constantinople. It's a magnificent monument, and they have done a tremendously good job restoring it, like I said. So yes, now it's open to people, and a lot of people visit it, but they all have to be prepared for a lot of hiking through very steep paths to get all the way to the top. It takes 20 minutes at least, minimum, non-stop walking from the beginning of the town of Monemvasia to the very top. And sometimes, you know, people are struggling to get to the top, but once they get up there and they see the view from up there, or they enter that magnificent church, it all pays back.
All right. Well, it is certainly a beautiful building perched on that cliffside. And speaking of being perched on the cliffside, we have a little video of one of your visits with Rick from up next to this church. Let's take a peek.
My goodness, Rick Steves on the cliff at Monemvasia, and this is an old Byzantine church that's being restored here in the old high town. And this is one of the most evocative places, reminding us how many layers of history are here. We've got the thrill of having an archaeologist, Effie, and my guide, Niki. And Effie just asked me, are you afraid of heights? Why? What's here? What do we see when we look down, Effie?
What do you see?
Whoa.
You said there's a trail down there? Tell me about that trail.
There's a trail that takes you all around the rock.
Yeah.
From the breeds outside the town, inside the castle walls.
Oh, baby, my stomach is doing flip-flops.
And in the summer, you can see the sea turtles.
Sea turtles?
The sharks?
No sharks.
I haven't seen
no sea turtles.
any sharks.
Well, we've got the wonders of Greece awaiting your exploration. Happy travels from Monemvasia in Greece. Yassas.
Oh, Niki, this makes me want to tour Monemvasia with you and Effie, we always talk about how local guides are the greatest investment you can make. And I should say, in the links that are in the chat widget, we do have a link to Niki's website where you can learn more about her private guiding services. But we have one more stop that we are going to take with Niki tonight. So if you have any questions, be sure to put those in the Q&A. And Niki, let's continue on to our last stop for the night, Nafplio.
Let's go.
The city of Nafplio is the perfect base for exploring the northeast corner of the Peloponnesian Peninsula.
Okay, I have to stop already, Niki, because I've seen it as Nafplio without an N on the end and Nafplion with an N on the end. Is one correct?
Both are correct. It's just that modern Greek has simplified some pronunciations and some ways of writing. And Nafplion with the N in the end is closer to the classical way of writing, to the Byzantine way of writing, while Nafplio is the more modern way of writing and saying the name. But no, either one will be understood, and either one are correct ways of pronouncing the name of the city.
All right, well, let's take a look at Nafplio/Nafplion.
Nafplion is a striking reminder that this part of Greece was, for centuries, an outpost of Venice. The island in the harbor was the first line of local defense. The second line was the Peloponnese fortress, capping the hilltop high above. Climb 999 steps above Nafplion and you reach this early 18th century fortress. Your reward, along with a great view, is a chance to appreciate the far-reaching power of the Venetian Empire in its day. The Peloponnese fortress, regarded as the best example of Venetian military architecture, saw plenty of action. It fell to the Ottomans in 1715, played a role in the Greek War of Independence in the 1820s, and was occupied by the Nazis during World War II. Nafplion is one of Greece's prettiest towns. Its narrow streets are lined by elegant Venetian houses and graceful neoclassical mansions. Like the big square in Athens, Nafplion's main square is called Syntagma, or Constitution Square. A constitution was the dream of many in the 1820s as the Greeks were creating their newly independent nation. As this town was one of the first liberated from the Ottoman Turks in 1822, Nafplion became the new country's first capital city.
Niki, I did not realize that Nafplion used to be the capital city of Greece. When did Athens take over that title, and why was that transition eventually made?
Something very important for people to understand is that Greece was under the Ottoman occupation for 400 years. While the rest of the world was experiencing the Renaissance, we were experiencing the darkest ages of our history. And believe it or not, one of the less inhabited and less important cities during that period was Athens. And after a lot of fighting and after a lot of efforts to organize the revolution against the Ottoman Turks on the 19th century, which was basically organized and started from the Peloponnese and big part of it from Nafplio, we had a country, could we call it a country? We had a nation that was struggling to find a way to get organized again, and people trying to put things together. So Nafplio, which was one of the cities that was inhabited and was occupied for most of the time that Greece was under the Ottoman occupation by the Venetians, it was all this back and forth like many other areas by Venetians occupying it, then the Ottomans reoccupying it, then the Venetians occupying it again, was a city that had an amazing economy, a very important port, very beautiful architecture. So once they started trying to figure out, organizing the new country, where the capital of this new country should be, in the beginning, they chose an island, the island of Aegina, which was for a few months the capital of Greece. Then they realized that they would have difficulties having an island being the capital of Greece. And then they chose Nafplio. 1828, Nafplio became the capital of modern Greece. Then there were some other very serious historic events happening there. Our first governor, short of prime minister, was murdered, was assassinated in the city of Nafplio, and then a lot of problems rised again. Then we had a king brought to Greece from Bavaria, King Otto, who was only 18 years old when he came and took over the country that was trying to, anyway, get a new identity and stand on its feet. And there was all this love of Western Europeans for classical Greece, for ancient Greece. The father of King Otto, Ludovic, was in love with classical Greece and Athens. So he was mainly the one who convinced his son to move the capital from Nafplio to the glorious city of Athens, which, believe it or not, when in 1834, Athens became the capital of modern Greece, was more like a dirty village with something like 8,000 people living there, just dirt and rubble all around the Acropolis, and a new city as the capital this time, starting to be built and organized all around the greatest monument of all centuries, the Acropolis, with the Parthenon on top.
Well, with that fascinating description, I didn't realize only 8,000 people were there when they decided to make it the capital. Of course, if you want to hear Niki talk more about the great city of Athens, you can check out the recording of Niki's last Monday Night Travel presentation with us on the Monday Night Travel homepage. But Niki, thank you so much for that tour of the Peloponnese this time. I really hope that I'm able to visit someday soon. And before we get to our Q&A for today, just one quick word from our sponsor. And our word from our sponsor today, I just want to let you all know that for this fall, we here at Rick Steves Europe are focusing, we're putting together a little campaign around the idea of why we travel. As many of us wrap up our travels for the year, we're going to be reflecting on our 2023 travels, what we learned from them, what the value of travel is, and how we can apply what we learned to our daily lives. So we're going to have a lot of fun updates on our social media pages, both on Instagram and Facebook, with a lot of different Rick Steves Europe staff members popping up to share lessons from their travels. Also, if you would like to share any photos or brief reflections from your travels that we may be able to share on Monday Night Travel or our social media accounts, you can send those to share@ricksteves.com. Maybe just send 2 to 3 photos and a few sentences about what you learned on your trip. And I believe that Julianne posted that email address in the chat widget. Julianne has also sent me some questions from all of you. So Niki, let's dive in and finish off the evening with a Q&A. So our first question comes from, let's see here. Oh, I love this question. So Jesse wants to know, if you could go back to any period in Greek history, not to live your whole life there, maybe you just go for a couple months so that you get to observe and really experience that culture, which period of Greek history would you go back to?
I had been asked this question before, and I had answered that I would love to be back in a day of the Olympics in the classical times, or walking around Athens in the classical times. That fascinates me more and more every time I read more about that part of history, and I kind of visualize the things that I read about and how they were doing this, how they were doing that. But I also came to think many times that I would have loved to be able to visit either Santorini or Knossos in Crete during the 3rd millennium BC and see how those amazing civilizations looked at the time and how people lived so long ago. So either one of those two periods, I would love to jump back in time and stay there for a little bit, because I think I wouldn't enjoy it as much as living in today and then come back again.
We have another question from Pam, who is wondering, speaking of great civilizations from Greece's past, do you have a favorite Greek philosopher, or maybe is there kind of a text from a Greek philosopher or a great Greek thinker that you would recommend to travelers to read before they come visit Greece?
I think that you can't really say that you have a favorite philosopher, because each one of them had a different philosophy and a different way of expressing himself. But I would say, since reading most of the records we have of ancient Greek philosophers would be probably overwhelming for people that are not specializing in philosophy, I would say to read a little bit about the life of each one of them and what they were representing, because the one was continuing the next. I would start with Socrates. I would definitely want to focus on Aristotle and all the movement that he created with his thoughts. I would say read the basics about the most important ones of them.
We have another question, this one coming from Ben. Ben wants to know, what made you decide to be a tour guide, and why did you pick Olympia specifically? As I know you guide in different places, but you've said that you're especially passionate about guiding there. What made you kind of choose Olympia as the hub for your guiding?
First of all, becoming a guide was not something I was dreaming since I was little. I had no idea I wanted to become a guide when I was younger, but I always wanted to do something that would allow me to not be stuck in a desk and work behind a computer. I always wanted to do something that would allow me to travel and socialize with different people. And it was only after I graduated from school that a school for tour guides opened up in my hometown, and I just thought more seriously about doing it, since I would be able to do what I was dreaming of, travel and meet different people. And then the more I was getting into it, as I was studying those 3 years that it took me to get my degree and my license to be a guide, the more I was being fascinated by it. And then I started traveling all around the country. I started visiting various sites, but Olympia was the one that from the very beginning captured my heart. The landscape, the ideas that started from here, the way that you walk through the site and you can imagine all those young men training and working hard to become demigods by winning in the games. And then life in modern Olympia, which is near the water, which is in a beautiful territory that is not far from Athens. I think it was something that altogether brought me into choosing to be here more than any other site after, of course, the Acropolis after Athens.
And speaking of Olympia, we have Kathy who's wondering, are Olympia and Mount Olympus next to each other, or are they far apart?
Oh, everyone gets confused about that, and people are absolutely right to be confused. No, they are absolutely apart. Mount Olympus is the highest Greek mountain, and that's in northern Greece. That's about 6 to 7 hours drive north of Olympia. Olympia is on the Peloponnese, which is another part of Greece below the mainland, where Mount Olympus is at. But when they started the Olympics and they needed to find a good excuse for bringing all these people here and for stopping the wars and all that, they made up a story related to the father of the gods, Kronos. Here in Olympia, we have the hill of Kronos, where supposedly his throne was. And then the sanctuary that they built below that hill was the sanctuary that was dedicated to the Olympian gods. So the games they started in honor of the Olympian gods were called Olympia Games. And that was how the name derived, because in antiquity, Olympia was not a city. It was just a sanctuary. It was a place where they would host the games and people would have to leave, would have to return home. So everyone used to go and say, I'm going to the Olympia Games, I'm going to the Olympia Games, I'm going to the Olympia Games. And that was how the name that was given to it was Olympia.
Interesting. Well, I mean, make sure when you're using your Google Maps that you put in the correct place, because it sounds like they are a far drive apart. Niki, we have time for one last question. And this one comes from Isabel. I said earlier that I love learning about the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And Isabel is wondering, which of the 7 wonders of the ancient world is your favorite and why?
I think that since I have read so much about the statue of Zeus and I have presented it millions of times to people, I would say that this is my favorite because I have pictured it, I have visualized it, I have pictured myself into the temple looking at it so many times. But I wouldn't want to give less importance to the rest of them because there was a reason why they were wonders of the ancient world. They were, each one of them, so exclusive, so incredible, so much ahead of their times. But I would say the statue of Zeus. Yes.
Well, Niki, thank you very much. I know that you are still in the thick of your tour season. You still have some tours to go, but we appreciate you taking time this evening to take us on a virtual tour of the Peloponnese and equip those of us, I'm going to include myself in that, who hope to go to the Peloponnese ourselves one day. So thank you very much. Best of luck with the rest of your tours and have a nice night or morning.
Thank you too. Bye.
Bye. All right. And thank you to all of you for joining us. We are so glad that you joined us on Monday Night Travel tonight, and we hope that you'll be back next week when Robin Stencil takes us on a trip report that will go from the Arctic Circle to Andalusia and from British villages to Bosnia. There is a lot of ground to cover, so we hope that you will join us for that, and we wish you all a wonderful evening. Good night, Niki.
Good night.
Good night, Julianne.
Good night, Gabe.
Good night, everybody.